นะครับผมก็ในส่วนของสกวผมก็ใคร่ขอให้ข้อมูลเบื้องต้นไว้เพียงแค่นี้นะครับแล้วก็เดี๋ยวคงจะได้ฟังจากทางสถาบันคลังสมองและทางยูนิเซฟนะครับว่ามีความคิดเห็นแล้วก็มีความมุ่งมั่นหรือเขาเรียกคอมมิตในเรื่องนี้กันยังไงนะครับขอบมิสเตอร์แอนดรู
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sawasdee krap. It gives me great pleasure to say a few words to you at this important seminar on the establishment of an evaluation network in Thailand. The UNICEF representative to Thailand actually was scheduled to give these remarks, but he was called overseas at short notice and asked me to speak on his behalf. UNICEF, which is the United Nations Children's Fund. And those of you who do know it may wonder why we have been so keen to support this meeting. UNICEF has been working for children in Thailand for over 60 years. And in line with Thailand's advancing level of development, the nature of our work here is changing. UNICEF cooperation is increasingly about finding ways to support Thailand in sharing its experience internationally, as well as tapping networks to advance the rights of children. We hope that this strategy will ensure that children remain at the center of Thailand's development plan. One of the major lessons drawn from international experience is the importance of developing policy for children on the basis of sound and well-researched evidence. Well-designed and professionally executed evaluations are a very important part of that evidence base. A strong and effective community of qualified and committed researchers can make evaluation more central to program and policy development for children, of program impact, and enhance the effectiveness of program. We in UNICEF believe that evaluation practice can best be strengthened by the collective and professional efforts of colleagues working together in organized ways and through national organizations. A national evaluation network will be a means to ensure the independence and authority of evaluators. But evaluators themselves also have a clear responsibility to demonstrate values of democracy, integrity and transparency in their work, and to foster the highest intellectual and professional standards amongst the profession in Thailand. The community of evaluators is to promote the development of evaluation for results, transparency, and accountability in public policy and expenditure. The creation of national evaluation networks is not always an easy task and will be a long process, which we start today, of course. It is helpful to seek and form strategic alliances and networks both at home and internationally. UNICEF and the wider UN system in Thailand is ready to help. Besides technical support, UNICEF will help promote cooperation between national and regional evaluation societies, networks and associations, and knowledge exchange pertaining to evaluation. We will also support the building of leadership and capacity in evaluation, foster cross-fertilization of evaluation theory and practice around the world, and support the continuing professionalization of the evaluation function. I look forward to hearing and participating and to a fruitful and positive outcome with clear follow-up actions towards the establishment of Thailand's own evaluation network. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your considerations today. Thank you.
ผมในฐานะสถาบันคลังสมองของชาตินะครับก็เป็นความยินดีมากที่สถาบันคลังสมองของชาติได้มาร่วมกับหน่วยงานระดับใหญ่2หน่วยงานคือสกวและยูนิเซฟ ในการริเริ่มเครือข่ายการประเมินแห่งชาติในครั้งนี้นะครับผมตอนแรกก็สงสัยว่ายูนิเซฟมาเกี่ยวอะไรกับเรื่องการประเมินแต่ฟังคุณแอนดรูพูดแล้วก็เริ่มเข้าใจว่าจริงๆแล้วการประเมินมันอาจจะมีอยู่2 ส่วนคือส่วนหนึ่งอย่างเช่นยูนิเซฟก็สนใจเรื่องเด็กหรือสกวสนใจเรื่องการวิจัยนะครับในส่วนของคลังสมองเนี่ยอาจจะสนใจเรื่องระบบอุดมศึกษาเรื่องของมหาวิทยาลัยแต่อีกส่วนหนึ่งของการประเมินก็คือวิธีการวิทยาผู้ประเมิน methodology เรื่องเหล่านี้เป็นเรื่องที่เป็นสากลแล้วก็ควรจะต้องมีมาตรฐานมีcode of practice ที่ชัดเจนเพื่อจะได้ให้ผลการประเมินเป็นที่เชื่อถือได้ดังนั้นเรา3 หน่วยงานก็มีจุดร่วมกันอยู่อย่างหนึ่งก็คือทำยังไงให้วิธีการประเมินผลการประเมินและผู้ประเมินมีคุณภาพมีมาตรฐานเป็นที่ยอมรับผลที่ศึกษาออกมาจะได้ถูกนำไปใช้ได้อย่างตรงจุดแล้วก็มีประสิทธิภาพนะครับทีนี้ในส่วนของคลังสมองอยากจะขอเรียนข้อมูลพอเป็นสังเขปว่าสถาบันคลังสมองของชาติเนี่ยในสถานะแล้วเป็นมูลนิธินะครับตั้งขึ้นโดยทบวงมหาวิทยาลัยเมื่อหลายปีมาแล้วก็หน้าที่สำคัญก็คือทำวิจัยนโยบายทำ policy research ทีนี้การทำวิจัยนโยบายก็อาจจะมีอยู่2 ประเภทใหญ่ๆคือประเภทหนึ่งก็คือเสนอนโยบายใหม่ขึ้นมาหนึ่งก็คือว่าเสนอปรับปรุงเปลี่ยนแปลงนโยบายที่มีอยู่แล้วประเภทที่2เนี่ยผมคิดว่า จำเป็นต้องใช้ฐานจากการประเมินเป็นอย่างมากเพราะว่าเราคงจะต้องรู้ก่อนว่าจุดอ่อนจุดแข็งของนโยบายที่ใช้อยู่ปัจจุบันเป็นอย่างต้องแก้ไขข้อบกพร่องอย่างไรก็เป็นจุดที่เรื่องของมาตรฐานการประเมิน และผลการประเมินจะต้องเข้ามาช่วยนะครับในขณะนี้เราทำเรื่องนโยบายอยู่2-3 ด้านหนึ่งที่กำลังคุยอยู่แล้วก็ผมได้เรียนตะกี้นี้ก็คือเรื่องของนโยบายอุดมศึกษาการพัฒนามหาวิทยาลัยไทยการพัฒนาระบบอุดมศึกษาไทยเรื่องที่2เนี่ยท่านอาจารย์สมพรอิสวิลานนท์เป็นหัวหน้าใหญ่ก็คือเรื่องของยุทธศาสตร์นโยบายเกษตรของไทยในอนาคตตรงนี้ก็ส่วนหนึ่งก็เป็นการมองข้างหน้ามองอนาคตเกษตรไทยว่าจะเป็นอีกส่วนหนึ่งก็ต้องประเมินสิ่งที่เป็นอยู่ในปัจจุบันว่ามันมีส่วนดีอยู่ตรงไหนมันมีจุดบกพร่องตรงไหนควรจะต้องเปลี่ยนอย่างไรนโยบายอันที่3ที่เราเพิ่งรับมานะครับ เรื่องของนโยบายการปฏิรูประบบวิจัยของประเทศซึ่งตรงนี้ก็มีเสียงเรียกร้องอย่างที่อาจารย์พรีเดชได้พูดถึงเมื่อกี้นี้อยู่หลายปีแล้วว่ารูปแบบการคิดเรื่องวิจัยของประเทศไทยเนี่ย มันเป็นแบบเดียวคือเป็นงานวิจัยวิชาการเป็นหลักการประเมินคุณภาพการวัดผลงานก็ดูจากผลงานตีพิมพ์เป็นหลักแต่ที่จริงแล้วงานวิจัยมีประโยชน์มากกว่านั้นเยอะมีบทบาทในสังคมของประเทศกำลังพัฒนาอย่างประเทศไทยเนี่ยมากกว่าการผลิตผลงานทางวิชาการเยอะเช่นการวิจัยเพื่อนำไปสู่การพัฒนาทางเศรษฐกิจการแก้ปัญหาของอุตสาหกรรมการแก้ท้องถิ่นนะครับ การวิจัยเพื่อช่วยในด้านการอนุรักษ์สิ่งแวดล้อมทรัพยากรธรรมชาติตลอดจนในขณะนี้ก็มีการขับเคลื่อนการวิจัยเพื่อสร้างความเข้าใจใหม่กับสังคมไทยที่กำลังเปลี่ยนแปลงไปเยอะในช่วงที่ผ่านมาเนี่ยนะครับเรื่องแบบนี้เป็นงานวิจัยที่ฉีกแนวออกไปจากงานวิจัยแบบดั้งเดิมเพราะฉะนั้นคุณภาพและผลที่คาดหวังจากงานวิจัยก็ไม่เหมือนเดิมแล้วก็ต่อเนื่องไปถึงว่าวิธีการประเมินหลักการประเมินก็คงจะต้องต่างกันออกไปด้วยเรื่องทำนองนี้เป็นเรื่องที่เป็นหัวข้อที่เครือข่ายการประเมินแห่งชาติคงจะได้หยิบยกขึ้นมาถกเถียงกันต่อไปในโอกาสที่เหมาะสมนะครับในนามของสถาบันคลังสมองของชาติผมก็ขอขอบคุณทุกท่านที่ได้กรุณามาร่วมในวันนี้นะครับและหวังว่าเราจะได้เริ่มอะไรที่เป็นสิ่งดีๆให้กับประเทศไทยก่อนบ่ายโมงวันนี้เพื่อจะได้เป็นก้าวต่อไปที่เราจะได้มาทำเรื่องของการประเมินเนี่ยให้มีมาตรฐานเป็นที่ยอมรับมากขึ้นสำหรับสังคมไทยขอบพระคุณครับ
ขอกราบขอบคุณอาจารย์ทั้ง3 ท่านนะครับ อยากจะเมื่อสักครู่มีเสียงกระซิบมานะครับบอกจะขอเอกสารการประชุมเนื่องจากการประชุมครั้งนี้เราพยายามใช้กระดาษให้น้อยที่สุดนะครับท่านสามารถดาวน์โหลดเอกสารได้ด้านหลังของกำหนดการนะครับ http://kut.trf.or.th นะครับอีกเรื่องหนึ่งคือแบบตอบรับการเข้าร่วมเครือข่ายที่ท่านอาจารย์พีระเดชกล่าวเมื่อสักครู่นะครับจริงๆแล้วท่านอย่าเพิ่งรีบกรอกตอนนี้ก็ได้นะครับรอฟังดูก่อนว่ามันใช่ไม่ใช่ตรงใจตรงเป้าหมายท่านหรือเปล่านะครับท่านจะมีส่วนร่วม contribute ตรงไหนแล้วเดี๋ยวค่อยกรอกตอนก่อนทานอาหารกลางวันกันนะครับในเซสชันต่อไปนะครับจะเป็นวิทยากรจากต่างประเทศนะครับผมขออนุญาตเปลี่ยนโหมดภาษาอีกครับI'm very pleased to send the next two sessions to Ms. Ada, Regional Counselor in Evaluation from UNICEF, to be a moderator. And again, ladies and gentlemen, please help us to welcome our two speakers, Professor Dr. Shiva Kumar and Mr. Koshi Thomas and Ms. Ada Ocampo. Please.
Yes. Sawadika. Good morning to everyone. It is my pleasure to be here with you this morning, and I'm delighted to moderate the session where Mr. Shiv Kumar and Mr. Koshi Thomas will be delivering keynotes this morning. I want, before introducing each of the speakers, I would like to let you know that we are going to benefit this morning from their knowledge and their experience in both evaluation, development, and also in networking. Their experience is very rich, and we will hear from them. It's also important to highlight that they have accepted to come here on a volunteer basis. They are representing their organizations, but they are collaborating with the network, and they are not here recruited as consultants or as professionals. We will have two sessions in this slot. The first one is titled Engaging Evaluation in Policy and Development, and the second one will be Opportunities and Challenges in the Creation of a National Evaluation Network. The first session will be delivered by Professor Shiv Kumar. He has a PhD in political economy and government from Harvard University. He is a professor at the Institute of Human Development in India. He is a visiting faculty at the Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, and also he's a visiting professor at the Indian School of Business. He's also a special advisor for UNICEF India Country Office, and he's an international consultant with various organizations. Mr. Koshi Thomas is, well, here it says he's a Deputy Undersecretary, Ministry of Finance of Malaysia. He's presently chairing the project outcomes-based budgeting of the Ministry of Finance. He's also a member of the Community of Practice of Asia Pacific. He's chairing the Community of Practice of Asia Pacific of Managing for Development Results. He has been the president of the Malaysian Evaluation Society from 2007 and 2010, and presently he is a member of the board of the Malaysian Evaluation Society. So a warm welcome to Shiv and to Koshi this morning, and it's my pleasure to give the floor to Dr. Shiv Kumar for his keynote. Thank you. If you
see everyone better from here. Okay.
No.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Yeah. Distinguished guests and friends, thank you very much for inviting me today to this very important occasion. It's a real privilege for me to be addressing this gathering this morning. As was mentioned by the three previous speakers, I think the stage for the discussions has been set very well by them. It's accepted and acknowledged almost all over the world that evaluation is absolutely critical for improving the quality of governance. As was mentioned, we are very much interested, and particularly the governments are very much interested in seeing that the public resources, which are very scarce, even in middle-income countries, it's not a problem only of low-income countries, but even in middle-income countries and high-income countries, resources everywhere are extremely scarce. So there is a genuine concern that these resources need to be used effectively, efficiently, and to ensure that they produce the results they are intended to. At the same time, there is a growing concern that evaluation must inform policy making. What are the lessons that we are learning from different countries, and within each country from different regions and different provinces? And how do you distill the lessons of this learning to inform better decision making? And finally, as was mentioned by the earlier speakers, there is this whole question of accountability, that there is a growing public pressure today across the world for greater accountability by the people who are asking the question, you know, you've committed so much, you're promising so much, why is it that the outcomes are not what they're intended to be? And the answers to all these questions really lies in effective and good evaluations. So I think the importance of evaluation is absolutely established at this point of time across the world. But at the same time, there is a growing feeling that evaluations that have been conducted so far, that are being conducted, are not exactly useful. They're not useful to policymakers for various reasons, and I'll refer to some of them, and neither are they useful to the community or to the people whom they're intended to benefit. And this has really raised very challenging questions about the usefulness and relevance of evaluation. While the evaluation profession is being challenged, I don't see this as a negative feature. In fact, I see it as an opportunity, and the fact that all of you have gathered here and such conferences are being held elsewhere in different parts of the world is a reflection of the challenge and the opportunity that faces the evaluation community to improve the usefulness and effectiveness of evaluation for policy and development. Today, I want to briefly reflect on this question. The first is, why is evaluation not considered as useful or as relevant as it ought to be? And in the second part of my presentation, I will respond to this question by identifying some of the areas where I feel there is potential for improving the evaluation practice. When you start with the first reason, I would say, of why evaluations are not seen as being so effective and useful, it has to do with the fact that expectations have changed dramatically over the past few years. As was mentioned by the speakers in the morning, people have moved away from evaluating projects. They're not looking at outputs. Projects and outputs have been left behind. People are asking, what is the outcome? What is the impact? We are spending so much money. We have so many schemes. We have so many programs. We have so many policies in place. What is the impact? Is this contributing to progress in the lives of people? And this thrust on impact and improvements in people's lives really is a shift in the way policymakers and development practitioners have started thinking about public interventions. Now, what is progress? starting from the 1990s with the advent of the Human Development Reports, it is quite increasingly acknowledged that it's about capability expansion, capability to be well-nourished, capability to be educated, capability to get a decent job, capability to participate in public decision-making. So we're really talking about people and what their capabilities are. It is about expanding freedoms. In fact, in the broader notion of development as freedoms, you're talking about it's not about people acquiring more and more wealth or becoming richer and richer every day. That is hardly the goal of any individual in society. What people aspire to do is to really have greater choices. So you have more freedoms and the freedom to exercise those choices. And these freedoms have cut across a whole gamut of issues. You're talking about economic freedoms, you're talking about political freedoms, voice and participation, you're talking about social freedoms. In South Asia, for instance, where I come from, women do not enjoy the same freedoms that men do. There is very strong anti-female biases and systematic discrimination against women. In other communities, you talk about social freedoms in the sense of what is happening to ethnic communities, minorities, indigenous people who don't have equal say and participation. So questions of freedoms come up, questions of choice comes up, and in the modern framework of human rights, this enhancement of capabilities and freedoms also translates to human rights. In fact, the rights-based approaches have also begun to challenge not just policymakers, but also the evaluation community. So what does it really mean to talk about the right to education? Does it mean that every child should have access to school, that there should be teachers in the school, that the facilities should be there? Is that what the evaluation is going to reveal? Or is the evaluation going to go beyond the physical infrastructure, beyond the provisioning of inputs, to asking the question, are children really learning? Is the learning really translating into what children want to do in terms of employment, in terms of exhibiting their creativity, in terms of contributing to society, and so on? So there are larger questions that the evaluation community is being forced to answer, and not just look at the provisioning of public goods and services. So the challenge before the evaluation community, and I think what the evaluation community has been doing and what is expected of them, and that is the expectation gap, is that when you start focusing on people, and the challenge, by the way, is much more serious for middle-income countries, you're talking about the impact on poverty. Now, the impact of poverty, again, is not confined to looking at income levels and purchasing power of people. We're talking about the poverty of opportunities. Do people in different societies, do children in different communities have equal education, the same quality of education? Do people in different parts of this country have equal opportunity to access good quality health care, regardless of where they are? So we're really talking about equal opportunities and the denial of those opportunities, which is actually a reflection of the poverty of opportunities. You're looking at equality. Questions of equity have again come back into the discussion in the public debates and discourse around development. But it is not narrowly again confined to equality of income and wealth. That is the preoccupation of conventional economists. But today you find people are talking about the equality of opportunities. And these are not just economic and social opportunities, but much more so political opportunities for both women and men in influencing public decision-making. There's a lot of discussion about eliminating injustice in society. In fact, the nice thing about injustice, Professor Amartya Sen has a new book called The Idea of Justice, where he talks and he says that in any society, it is much easier to identify injustice than to define what the ideal notion of justice should be. So if I say, what is your idea of a just society, you will have 100 interpretations. But if I say, in your society, can you identify what are the major forms of injustices? Some of them may be visible, but a lot of them, particularly when it comes to issues of gender and discrimination against women, are invisible, because they're so ingrained in the way social patterns of society and arrangements of society are there that we don't notice it, that there is injustice in society. So how do you identify these injustices, and how do you act? How do you get policies to make a difference? You're talking about ending insecurity. And again, the literature on human security is very broad, and says that if you're measuring progress in society, are we feeling safe and secure as a people or not? And it has little to do, it has something to do with your income levels, standards of living, and so on, but a lot of the vulnerabilities that people face in society, even in developed countries, the global economic crisis is a classic example of what happens when you think you're so solid and secure, earning such high levels of income, and just one incident can really rock the boat. So has society really provided for protection against downside risks? So we're talking about vulnerabilities, we're talking about powerlessness, and we want the evaluations and the evaluation profession to contribute to a better understanding, contribute to policy formulation and this development dialogue. And so there is a high expectation from the evaluation community, but at the same time, the challenges of how to adapt the profession and the practice of evaluation to answer these questions is not an easy question. The second reason follows from what I've been saying, that the development challenges have become much more complex. In the early stages of development, what you needed to do, you knew very well. You had to build schools, you had to build roads, you had to build infrastructure, you had to get the airports functioning, you had to get the railway system functioning. That was quite easy. But today, the exercise of policy formulation itself has become very complicated. How do you get sustained results? There is so much unpredictability. As countries get more and more linked into the global community, we are happy with the benefits of globalization, but it also reduces the control you have or the degrees of freedom you have to define and shape and guide your own internal domestic policies. So how do you look at this from an evaluative perspective? There are multiple shareholders and stakeholders in the process of development. Earlier, the equation was quite simple. At one level, you had the government. At the other level, you had the communities and people. And it was the function of government to provide the resources and the public services and public goods to the people. But that's changing because you suddenly find there are layers and layers of intermediaries with different vested interests. There is the impact of coalition politics in this. You don't know who is pulling in what direction. So it becomes much more complicated because you want the community and all these stakeholders to join or pushing a policy forward, but it's not such an easy exercise. The third reason is that the challenge that the evaluation profession faces again has to do with understanding the processes of change. So it's not just saying that the process of policy making is complex and complicated, but once you put a policy into place and you have a particular program that is in place, how do you understand change? Now, this itself has become very difficult because of many, many things that are happening. There is such an interconnectedness. You may be doing an intervention in health, but the outcomes of health are influenced by not just by what you're doing in the medical sector, but by what is happening in the field of education, what is happening in the field of nutrition, what is happening in the field of water and sanitation, what is happening to livelihoods. In fact, if you look at the literature on the social determinants of health, people will say that outcomes in health are so much more influenced by social behaviors. What is happening to society? What is happening to discrimination? When I ask the question, are people able to access health services, the idea of universal health coverage is not about universal provisioning of health facilities. It's about actually ensuring that different peoples from different communities have affordable access to good quality. So that understanding of access is intermediated by a variety of social factors and cultural factors. So understanding change itself is complicated. And the reason I'm highlighting this, and that is the fantastic feature of this gathering today, that you need multidisciplinary perspectives. And that is the real challenge of evaluation, that many professions, as social scientists, as an economist, have looked at projects. There are sociologists who have looked at the same project. There are anthropologists, there are political scientists, there are public administration experts, there are management experts. They all look at the same problem, but from different perspectives. But what the evaluation profession faces today is how do you integrate and draw on these multiple disciplines to inform and guide and pick out the lessons and distill the lessons of public policy. So this interconnectedness that I talked about also requires that evaluation should become multidisciplinary, drawing on the knowledge systems from different disciplines. And that is beginning to happen, but a long way to go. The fourth reason that in terms of why people are saying evaluations are not so useful and relevant and are losing their shine is because of what I said, hinted to, is how do you really draw lessons? I mean, it is not enough to just evaluate a particular project. The constant, for instance, we are trying to do lots of things in health and education, and particularly with UNICEF, an international organization. They say UNICEF is doing so many evaluations of the same problem in 150 or 160 countries across the world. What are the lessons learned? So it is not, the idea is not to say that this is working in Mexico, so it should be transplanted into Thailand and therefore it will work in India. No. But people are very keen to know what are the lessons learned. Constantly. Where does it work? Why does it work? When does it work? Why is it not working in this place? What do I need to do? We are all eager to learn lessons from evaluations. And unfortunately, if you look at the nature of evaluation reports that come out, many of the policy makers and decision makers will tell you that, well, you know, we don't know if this can be generalized. Is it really confined to a particular community? Or do you think there are lessons that we can take and adapt to a larger society or a different culture? Because the context is so different. And when you're talking about evaluation, this is the challenge of the practice and profession of evaluation, that contexts play a very important role. But if you confine your findings to say that it is relevant to this particular context, you also lose the benefit of evaluation to generalize. So this gap from understanding a local context, why an intervention worked, the big leap to say that yes, if you do A, B, C, D, it will also work in a different context and on a larger scale that influences society more holistically and comprehensively, that is again a gap which the evaluation profession has not yet fully mastered. So when you're talking about different contexts, the societies are heterogeneous. I think even in this country, you will have different communities. You'll have forest dwellers. You'll have tribal communities. You'll have different ethnic groups. Their cultural practices are different. So you have many factors that have to be taken into account while doing evaluations. Into this contextual difference, I also want to bring in the practice of democracy. Because when you're talking about evaluation and accountability, we are also embedding it in a practice of democracy, which means open participation, public dialogue, public debates, public reasoning. And how do politics play out? Are people really able to influence the political systems of decision-making in terms of electing representatives, in terms of holding representatives accountable? What is the process? Is evaluation feeding into this? So when you bring in the political economy of development into the evaluation framework, then you find that politics is quite complicated. Not just politics as I'm talking about among political parties, but you look at institutions, you look at society, within the household. So there's a lot of intra-household literature that talks about the politics within the family, about resource allocations, about decision-making within the family, and so on. So the evaluator has to be really pushed into looking at these dimensions of differentials in the different dimensions of different contexts in order to draw lessons, and that's quite a challenge. The fifth reason, I think, why people say evaluation is still not as useful as it should be, has to do with something that I've been talking for a long time, that defining and measuring outcomes and impact is not an easy task. So it was nice for me at the beginning to start talking about empowerment, talking about non-discrimination, talking about self-esteem. In fact, many people will tell you that even very poor families are not looking for more and more money, but they want it to be treated with respect. They're looking for dignity. They're looking for non-discrimination. So what are the measures when you're talking about progress in society, and these become critical measures of assessing progress among people? What are the measures we have? What indicators do you need? So this whole question of defining these terms, identifying the measures, identifying the indicators, and then putting in process a motion of collecting that kind of information for analysis is again a big gap. In fact, it's a common, I do a lot of evaluations for the United Nations. Every report will systematically tell you that all evaluations stop at the level of outputs. The second question, yes, more and more women are participating in political processes. That's absolutely correct. But is that participation translating into greater resource allocations in favor of women? Or is it translating into better outcomes from the resource allocations in terms of what it means for women's lives and children's lives? That's a big question. We can't say. Why can't you say anything about that? Because we just don't have the indicators. So then you enter the realm of speculation. So you speculate, yes, you know, well, if more women are participating, it really means that it's a good thing for society. So once you say it's a good thing for society, in principle, yes. But you really have to push the argument and say, is it really true that more women in political participation does result in better outcomes for women and children and for society at large? So that is the critical evaluative question. And at this point of time, in very few countries have I seen the absolute measures of how do you do this measurement of outcomes from this perspective. The last reason why I think evaluation has lost some of its sheen and glory is what was already talked about, is that the evaluation function faces a number of constraints. And I think if the evaluation discipline has not risen to the occasion and has not kept pace with the growing demands on it for change, it is because in every country that I have been to, the evaluation function is highly constrained. First, in terms of financial resources. It is incredible how much public resources are going into increasing investment for children. Thanks to UNICEF, more and more money goes into health, more and more money goes. How much resources, financial resources, are allocated for evaluation of these programs, you will find absolutely minuscule. That we have tiny percentage. It's a major problem in my country, India, where in the last 5 years or 7 years, we have seen some radical and very progressive measures in terms of employment guarantee, in terms of assurance health, in terms of right to education. Incredibly large sums of money are being invested. But if you ask the ministries, how much money have you kept for evaluation? Absolutely nothing. So there is a financial question, and therefore it is extremely important to ensure that the states and the governments do allocate certain amount of financial resources. The data constraints I've already talked about. Then you have the human resource problem. And I think part of the reason this network is being formed is that you have to meet the capacity for conducting evaluations is limited. By the way, I also want to say it is equally limited in the north. In the earlier days, it used to be understood that you could fly in a consultant from the West who would come into our developing countries and tell us what is right and what is wrong. But those days are also over now because it is extremely difficult. It is extremely difficult. In fact, coming from India, I must say that I don't speak all the languages of my state, of my country. There are 12 official languages, and I speak only 2. So if you transport me from my region to some other region to do an evaluation, it is as good as flying in an American to do the evaluation. So how do you build this capacity that is local, that is where local people who understand the culture, the context, the political realities, the social realities of the situation, engage in dialogue, who can understand and see what people are saying, and then build the report. So the capacity question is very, very serious, even within countries in that sense. And finally, I want to say on the evaluation question, there is a growing recognition, and rightly so, and particularly because of the human rights activists who say that outcomes or results cannot be delivered only by the government. So you need to have partnerships. And once you talk about partnerships, then the rights people will tell you that then we have to identify what the roles and responsibilities of each one of us are as partners in this exercise. So if I ask why are some children not going to school, I cannot just stand back and say, hey, it's a failure of government. That's a very simplistic analysis. So the rights argument will say that no, what was the role of the government? What was the role of the school teachers? Are there teachers' unions? Have the unions performed their roles? What has been the role of the community? What has been the role of the parents? what has been the role of international agencies that are supporting education. So you bring all the actors in and say, what are the roles and responsibilities of each? There is multiple accountability. And when you have this kind of a multiple accountability, then evaluation becomes complicated, because you have to then identify which of these, how have these different stakeholders performed in terms of meeting their obligations and their commitments, and why have they not performed what they were supposed to perform. So that really, it is not so much a question of attribution, whether you did it or you didn't do it, but as a team, whether we all played together and ensured that there was collective action resulting in desired outcomes. So let me move to the second part of my presentation. It actually flows from the 6 reasons that I feel have really constrained this profession and practice of evaluation, and why people are saying that it is not and development, to saying what I feel are some of the areas where more needs to be done. The first one, as I have already indicated, the most important intellectual challenge facing the evaluation profession is to understand how change has happened or not happened. We have to look for change that is transformatory. You have to look for change that is positive. You have to also factor in unintended changes, because it's very, like I said, so much is unpredictable. So understanding change itself is critical. And to do new frameworks of change, to ensure that the change logic, what was the understanding? What was the logic of change that we all talked about when we designed the program or the intervention? Has it been documented? Has it been monitored? Has the premises and hypotheses been tested? Have the results of the hypothesis testing been fed into policy so that the policy and programs have been revised? So understanding this change logic is extremely important. It requires very much more sophisticated skills and multidisciplinary skills than very simple log frames that seem to have dominated much of the discipline. You need to understand the causal pathways. You need feedback loops. You need much deeper interrogation and investigation into the underlying assumptions. So this is a big challenge in the areas, intellectual areas of how do you really beef up the discipline and the practice of evaluation. And it's wonderful to see such an interdisciplinary group where you have practitioners, you have people from academia, you have people from research institutions coming together to share their views on this subject. The second area, again, it's an intellectual area when you're talking about evaluation from a multidisciplinary perspective, is that the focus of evaluation should be on understanding power and privilege. And I say power and privilege because you have to really get into the political economy of both policy making and development. And this is not an easy thing. I mean, if you look at your own societies, middle-income countries, there is so much of power. It's all about power relationships. It is about power asymmetries. Why is it that the issues of farmers, or why is it that are not getting the kind of prominence that they should get? Why is the discussion focused much more on foreign direct investments and infrastructure and building of airports and building of roads than on building schools and building hospitals and building primary healthcare centers? So this trade-off that we see, and we're constantly fighting this every day in the policy fronts. In India, we are just introducing a food security bill. We are arguing that just like you have the right to education and the right to health, every citizen of the country should have the right to basic food, a minimum quantity of food that is offered to you at an affordable and subsidized price. The policy recommendations have been made. It will go into Parliament soon. But the process has been a struggle. It has been an absolute struggle. And the question that comes up consistently is, where are the resources going to come from? In the paper that India is going to invest $1 trillion. I don't know how many zeros a trillion has. But $1 trillion in physical infrastructure over the next 10 years. Where is that money going to come from? So, you know, the evaluation question is all about understanding the politics of decision-making, the power relationships. How do you get the voice of the underrepresented? How do you get the voice of the marginalized? How do you get the voice of the socially disadvantaged into the public debates and represent them? And for that, you really need to have very strong evidence that can be evaluation. So I really say, in fact, in my country, we say it's not a question of whether India can afford to invest in education or it's a question of whether India can afford not to invest. Because the cost of not investing is much greater. I remember the education debate, they say, does India have money to make elementary education free and compulsory for all children? At that time, try ignorance, because the cost of ignorance is much more. So you cannot afford to have societies where you find people have left behind. And so really it is about understanding the notions of power and privilege and the capture of public resources and public decision-making by these groups, and how to break that. The third area for improvement, as I have already mentioned, has to do, of course, with enhancing the capacity for evaluation. I think investing in education is a critical area, and I'm sure this network will continue to do that, but also forming networks like this to bring together the community of practitioners and thinkers is extremely critical. We have to push for innovative methods, and in fact, this is another lesson that we are learning, that very few countries, I mean, everything is almost indigenous and locally devised and grown today. So the dependence that you can ask somebody or invite somebody, yes, for a discussion, but we really have to build local capacities, national capacities by introducing innovative methods, by designing performance measures and indicators that are more appropriate to our contexts. There are three other small areas that I want to flag, since we are talking about the network, which the next speaker will talk about, and where I see this going. Focus not only on national results, but on disaggregated results. So the real exercise today is, if you see much of the data and trends, there's a lot of discussion on the Millennium Development Goals, whether this country will reach it or not reach it, which goal they will achieve, which goal they will not. But even in a country like China that I've been working in, where you find that in terms of the poverty goals, China has not just achieved it, but has surpassed the MDG goals even now. But you go into that country and you find huge segments of population that are leading lives of deprivation. So the picture has to really be disaggregated. So when you're talking about what is happening in this country, or what are we talking about communities, you're talking about disaggregation of in the lives of people. You have to look at sub-regional, sub-provincial, local level data and talk about equity from that perspective. That are different groups benefiting? It's a simple question to ask, but a very complicated evaluative question. Are the benefits of growth flowing equally to all communities? That's an easy question, but the answers are very difficult. The fifth point here again is about decentralizing evaluation. The way we start thinking about, in fact, it's a question and a challenge for the Thailand network as well. We have a very centralized approach towards thinking about building evaluation capacity. So in most of the countries I go to, the think tanks, the research institutions will all be in the capital city. If you go to the province, it will be in the capital of the province. Rarely do you see capacity. So if you want to really do a field work or do somewhere, people from New Delhi will fly into some tribal or forest area to do the study. So how do you really think of extending the reach of this network, extending capacity building for evaluation by decentralizing the practice and the discipline of evaluation? How do you get local communities and local institutions to strengthen their capacity to participate and contribute to the process and practice of evaluation? And the last point I'd like to make and stop is that in every society there is a resistance to evaluation. In fact, when I ask the question, why is evaluation so unpopular, much of it has to do with the fact that nobody wants to be evaluated. So how do you really bring into society a genuine culture of evaluation? And that's a challenge that many of our countries face. And here I think the key lies in what I say about democratizing evaluation. And when I talk about democratizing evaluation, it is to politicize evaluation. And politicized evaluation is not a negative concept. Politicized evaluation means putting the information that you have from the evaluation in the hands of people. How else will we get policy change? You do a fantastic evaluation report, you submit it to the government, they say that in due course we will place it in parliament, you don't know what's happened to it. So how do we take the findings of evaluation and find very useful ways of disseminating it to the community? In fact, in the process of evaluation, you must involve the community itself so they know what we are trying to do, not just fly in as consultants and evaluators, do it and fly out. But how do you set in motion a process where the participants themselves are conscious of what are the evaluative questions, what are we trying to find out, why are we doing it, how will it benefit them, and involve them. Involve them not just as data collectors to do the field survey, but in terms of feeding them with findings and asking them to respond and getting a management response from a community response to the evaluation itself becomes very important. Because I feel that in any democratic process, unless people start asking questions, there will be no pressure on the state to bring in any kind of policy change. So you have to empower people with the knowledge from evaluation so that they demand change. There is public debate. There are discussions. Why is this happening? This is not happening there. Why is this happening here? What is happening? And we really have to energize the community. And this is what I mean by talking about democratizing evaluation, taking evaluation to the people and genuinely making them feel that it is for the people and not that we are all accountable to the government and that we are submitting a report to the government. And I think in the process of this network, which I'm sure will find ways of reaching out to the community and the larger community, the idea is not to make everyone an evaluator, but to make them conscious of the usefulness of evaluation and to make them users of evaluation, not necessarily conductors of evaluation. And for this, we need public support. You need social mobilization. You need strong leadership. And I'm delighted to see that the champions of evaluation are all here and that I see a great and bright future for this network in the years to come. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing the others and sharing in the deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. Before giving the floor to the people that wish to ask questions to Chief, I would like to thank you very much, Professor Shiv Kumar, for this excellent speech and challenging questions that he has posed to us as evaluators. And I think that if I may interpret with my own words what he has, his main message, the message he conveyed is that evaluation is an agent or should be an agent for change. It means that we should look beyond, if we want to approach evaluation as an agent for change, we should look beyond what our project design, our program design only establish, but to look at the development challenges and our commitments towards a more democratic and a society that is based in ethical and principles and to look beyond that. Thank you very much, Chief. We have 30 minutes for questions and answers. So if you agree, Chief, we can take 3 or 4 questions per round, and if you can answer it, so we can take the advantage of the time we have. So please, the persons who have questions, I invite them to raise their hands. No questions? Ready for tea? Questions, comments, clarifications? Yes?
No, can't hear.
Can somebody help with the microphone, please? Okay, that one's working. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Shachat Gulansi from Rangsit University. I am very glad that I have here some valuable information from Dr. Shiva Kumar. But I have one question to ask. Since you have some experience in evaluation, can you supply us some sort of samples that you use for the evaluation of any kind of project? Because you said nobody wants to be evaluated. We would like to have some idea that we can be a body of evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. More questions, clarifications, comments? Yes, please go ahead. Okay.
I just would like to ask you to elaborate a little bit more about how to politicize evaluation. I think that's quite important, especially in policy work. And how do you do it in a balanced way, keeping a safe distance at the same time getting involved in the policy making process? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we take a third question and then ask Professor Chief? Yes, please.
ขออนุญาต
Right
นิดนึง
to
นะ
the lady
Sorry.
there.
Sorry.
Sorry.
ท่านผู้เข้าร่วมสามารถถามเป็นภาษาไทยก็ได้นะครับ เรามีร่ามแปลฮะเดี๋ยวเชิญด้านหลังก่อนนะฮะแล้วค่อยอาจารย์ปัทมาวดีนะครับ
Thank you very much. A very interesting presentation. I would like to ask because many of us are university and we have a kind of, sometimes we have basic research which we need to have some impact too, but in the case of basic research, how can we evaluate such a kind of research which may not be yet implemented into the area? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The first round with the question you are going to ask. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
And Junet from Consumer Protection Association. I think it is very interesting seminar, but I have one question. Almost of people don't like to evaluate. That's right. But it is the very important process to develop the process of the instruction or another. I have the question that how to make or how to build the exception of the people who involved about the evaluation process. How to build the good reaction from them. Thank you.
We will stop there, but we will give the opportunity to 3 or 4 other people in the second round. Questions.
Yeah.
Chief, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for those comments and the questions. The first question is, are there examples of good evaluations? I think it's a very important question. And if you ask me, what is a good evaluation? I would say that judging a good evaluation for me does not rest in the strength of the methodology alone, or in the quality of writing, or in the effectiveness with which the arguments have been made. These are absolutely essential, and there are several examples of that, those kinds of evaluations. In fact, Ada, sitting here as the regional advisor of UNICEF evaluation, she can give you several instances from across this region of very good, technically sound evaluation reports. And I think it's a very important question, and as part of the network, I would really suggest that one of the contributions of UNICEF should be, and others should be, to bring to the table very good, technically sound and competently done reports. But for me, technical competency is only one feature of what a good evaluation is supposed to be. As I've been arguing, for me, a good evaluation is a report that has generated the desired outcome. So for me, the exercise does not stop with the preparation of a good report and its submission and collecting the fees and going home. And I think that is why networks are so important, because research institutions and academic institutions that do good evaluations are not necessarily good at advocacy. They're not necessarily good at taking the message and communicating them, mobilizing society and the different stakeholders, and demanding change. In fact, it is unfair of us to expect research institutions and academics to be so involved in the issue, because they move on to other things. There's an intellectual curiosity, they engage themselves, produce the results. So for me, a good evaluation depends upon the results and the outcomes of that evaluation. What has been the response to that evaluation? And in fact, I would say that in understanding how good evaluations are, we have to see it depends upon not just the technical quality of the report, but on the timeliness, on what was done after the report was submitted to mobilize public opinion, to give it the visible publicity, to demand a response from the government or from whichever institution, and to then see whether many of the recommendations of that evaluation have really gone into revising the policies and the programs. So that, in fact, that is a very tough question. It links into the second question which I was asked, on how do you politicize evaluation? And this is precisely the point. I think it is easiest to address the technical competency issues, because you can do that. There are methods, and you can do some very interesting, innovative ways of surveys and techniques, and all that is there. But when I talk about the politicization of evaluation, it is to talk about quality, independence, credibility, and reaching the messages and demanding a response from people. And I talk about politicization, about the importance of independence and credibility of evaluation, because I've often been, and Ada has heard me say this many times before, there is a big push for evidence-based policy making. And we will all subscribe to that. We need to do evidence-based policy making. But as somebody who works with government, I'm not from the government, but I work very closely with government, because I strongly believe that many of the issues that we are talking about, you need a very strong and effective government. I find that many of my friends in government do exactly the reverse. They do data-based policy making. So in the sense that they look for the data that will justify the policy. So once they've introduced the policy, they are looking for, which consultant or which group will say this policy is working. So it is very important when you're talking about politicizing evaluations to really ensure that this, I don't know how it is in Thailand, but in India, the Ministry of Health that finances health, designs the program, implements the program, monitors the program, will also will pay for the consultant who is going to do the evaluation. So it is all evaluation for the government, by the government, of the government. And that doesn't work. So when I talk about politicizing evaluation, you really have to talk about independence, credibility, and quality, and to take it out as an independent function so that you're keeping an oversight, which is extremely important. So the question for us, for the evaluators, is not just whether the policy is working or not. We are asking a more fundamental question: is the policy right? And that even, in fact, the debate between the Office of the Auditor General and the evaluators, this debate is there. The Auditor General's office, that often reports as an independent agency to the Parliament in many countries, the Auditor General's office looks whether the policy is working or not. But the Auditor General cannot question the policy and ask, was the policy right in the first place? Is it achieving the equity goals? Is it achieving that? It is not. So when I talk about politicizing evaluation, I'm talking about this gap that exists, and how to involve different institutions, independent institutions, and promote the practice much more broadly across different constituencies in society. The third question had to do with basic research, and I must say that, I don't still consider, after 10 years of being in this field of evaluation, I feel nervous about calling myself an evaluator. Because as an economist, I was involved in a lot of social science and economic research, which I have done. But when you transcend that, you're a good researcher, you're a good economist, you're a good researcher, a political scientist, from saying you're a researcher into this field of evaluation. And that, I find, is quite a fascinating journey, because the questions that the evaluator asks are not questions that the researcher necessarily asks. I mean, the criteria that the profession uses of efficiency, effectiveness, sustainability, relevance, etc., are not what the researcher would typically ask. The time frame is very different. When you're talking about development research, we have to do a trend analysis. I cannot tell you in 3 years whether people's attitudes have changed or society has changed. Transformation takes a long time. So research is necessary, because you have to step back and say, in the last 10 years, do I see the Thai society changing? In what way? But the purpose of evaluation sometimes is much more short-term, to say, okay, now, is it happening or not happening? What do you want me to do? So I see a complementarity between the two disciplines of continued, sustained social science research that tracks development changes over a period of time, and also the need to bring that knowledge into asking a more definitive question: is this policy working immediately or not? Do we need to change something or not? Because doing a post-mortem often may not be the best idea. And I think in terms of I think if I'm not mistaken, the last question, I may have alluded to it: what kinds of capacities do you build? What kinds of forums of interaction do you build between the academic community, research community, government, and institutions of civil society and non-governmental organizations, by bringing them onto the same platform and creating this culture of evaluation, an acceptance of evaluation as being critical for accountability and governance is what is central to what I have been arguing.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you very much again for challenging us, evaluators, to really ask the right questions when it comes to evaluate a project, a program, or a policy, even challenge the questions if they are given to us in the TORs, and to put evaluations into context, and for highlighting that good evaluations are not only that are methodologically bring change, so it's what some people call influential evaluations. So influential evaluations are those that are clear in their purpose, that are methodologically sound, that are well conducted, but at the same time that are able and that demonstrate that can influence, that can inform change. So influential evaluations. Thank you very much for that, and the floor is open for 2 or 3 more questions. Yes, please, Madam.
Yeah.
The mic? I don't think that mic is working.
It seems to me that you focus on policy program evaluation at a much macro level. But in evaluation, in fact, there are many different levels of evaluation. And in what is very contentious right now in Thailand is evaluation of organizational performance. Public sector agencies' performance, universities' performance, etc. And I think that at that level, the issue of sensitivity of the question of whether one wishes to evaluate for performance improvement, or is it a measure of punishment, is something that sometimes overlap and is not very clear. I would like to hear your view on this. If you have essentially the different levels of evaluation actually requires a different methodology, framework for looking at the particular evaluation in process. So I would appreciate some address or your idea on different levels of evaluation. I couldn't agree less with you about, I could agree more with you than about the politicization, bringing the message to the public and also get public involvement for larger policy evaluation. However, who will fund that? Because government agencies have money for the overall evaluation process from beginning, from designing the program to the final evaluation and dissemination of the result. in your experience, how could one actually have sort of independence in doing the evaluation process outside of the funders' agenda? Thank you.
Thank you very much for such an interesting question. We will take one more question, one or two. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm sorry I came in the middle of your talk, and I'm not quite sure about you have mentioned about the social impact or the evaluation of social impact. I'm from university. I'm a researcher in university, and I believe that some of the people here are from university. I have two questions here. The first one, could you make comment if some Thai people or some policymakers in Thailand try to make use of the World University Ranking to make changes in policies and in the ways of working in Thailand? Because what I feel is when you do the world ranking, it's not the same environment as a Thai environment. So I'm not quite sure, can you adapt or can use the data directly and try to make changes in Thailand? Could you comment on that? The second question, I like the sentence that you mentioned about the definition of the evaluation. It's a report that generates outcomes. Outcome is very important. We all know that. But it's very difficult for academic in university to produce outcomes and be evaluated by the administrators. So the question is, not the question, just we are evaluated in university, mostly from publication, citation from publication, or the number of graduates that we produce. But we hardly produce the outcomes to be evaluated. So can you suggest, if you want to evaluate outcomes for the staff in university, which way we can do that, suitable for the country like Thailand or maybe India? Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, then we'll... No more? Okay. Chief, please, the last round.
Thank you very much for your question. I think I completely agree with you. I've been talking about the different types of evaluations and the implications and ramifications and the methods and the sensitivities of those evaluations. Performance of organizations and public institutions is extremely, evaluation of those public institutions is extremely important. In fact, the question is often asked, is it necessary for public institutions to do justice to the people whom they are intended to serve? That's a big question, but I think it's an important question to answer. And what I would say is that, at least in my experience in different countries, these public institutions have also been captured by very powerful interest groups. And that there is an inherent incentive. On the contrary, there is absolutely no incentive of these groups that have captured these institutions to give up the privileges that they enjoy. So the challenge is really evaluation, and we must do evaluations of public institutions, and I'll come to how to do that. That's actually linked to your second question, is that we have to understand the roots of these, the basis for these power and what to do about it. So I think that is absolutely critical in terms of public institutions. Here I'm referring to groups of politicians, bureaucrats. You're looking at different staff members, staff associations. Nobody wants to disturb the status quo. And so it's very frustrating because it's only, we're talking about public administration reforms in some sense. Very few countries have been able to institute public administration reforms in spite of the fact that there are committees and committees and committees and good suggestions everywhere. So it is a tough question, which takes me to the second issue of how do you really ensure that something happens. And here I think there are two things that I'm seeing happening in different parts of the world. One is that in terms of mandating evaluation, it has to be, in fact, at some levels, even ensured through legislation. Today in India, for instance, many of the acts that I'm talking about, the Right to Education Act, the Food Security Act, we are mandating in the legislation itself for independent audits. And including, by the way, social audits, which are not entirely evaluation, but public vigilance, public monitoring, social audits, and so on, which give you different sources of information. So one way is to ensure through legislation, participation and independent evaluations, and also to ensure financial allocations. In fact, in the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act in India, a certain percentage is required under the law to be allocated for social audits and evaluations. So otherwise, I find that in terms of their own willingness to do this, there is a lot of reluctance. So I'm saying that part of the process of politicizing evaluation is also to address this question of the reluctance and the lack of incentives in existing public institutions to subject themselves to any form of evaluation. And these are some of the ways that we are doing it. The other question on social impact and relevance to Thailand, I think I did make the point that while there are lessons to be learned from the experience of different countries and different regions, the internalization of that experience and the adaptation of that experience has to be done locally. In fact, one of the arguments I've been making is when you're talking about capacity building, we really have to decentralize and disaggregate the capacity within our own countries so that there is a body of people with knowledge about what is happening in Thailand in different regions who are coming together to share that wisdom and experience. And I think that I see as the way forward. I did make the point it's extremely difficult for academics to be also very strong advocates and also to mobilize change, but I think that is the role of networks such as this, which brings in different constituencies and shares the information. And many times I find that in a meeting, after the academic expert who has done the evaluation makes the presentation, the activists take over. Because the voice of the academic is very strong, or the voice of the evaluator is very strong, and then it comes on into the field of the activists who then take the idea, messages, champion it, go to the media, do press conferences, hold rallies, and so on and so forth. And I strongly believe, as somebody who's not in government, that the public mobilization, public reasoning, public debate is absolutely central to bringing about any change in society. And so the long-term change that we're talking about is only if you mobilize and garner that kind of excitement in the public mind that, we have to improve the quality of schooling in this country. In the issue of the poor, it should not be confined to only the poor people talking about the problems of the poor. It has to be made a society's problem. In fact, whenever their slogans used to be education for all is a campaign. And my friends will say, education for all will remain a campaign unless you make it all for education. So we have to get that kind of a mobilization of everybody in society. And that's the right argument, that we are all stakeholders in ensuring that no part of our societies are left behind, that it's a threat to our own safety and security, sustainability of growth. If certain communities are not doing as well as the others, the questions of equity and justice are ignored. And I expect that evaluation will be very instrumental in feeding into this process of change to make all our societies much more stable, secure, and prosperous. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Koshi Thomas for his bio, but I will summarize it. He worked for the Ministry of Finance of Malaysia. He's chairing the project on outcomes-based budgeting. He's the chair of the Community of Practice of Asia Pacific on Management for Development Results. He's a member of the board of the Malaysian Evaluation Society. Koshi, the floor is with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ada. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my pleasure today to be here. I'm wearing two caps. One as a public sector official from the Ministry of Finance, and more, I think, because I also represent the Malaysian Evaluation Society, And I think this is what we are here today, to also look into the setting up of the Thailand Evaluation Network and to share some of our experiences with you. When I looked at the schedule for today, I realized that there are many eminent speakers here, a lot of professors and from the academia. Unfortunately, I'm not basket. The only thing close to an academic is my gray beard. So, but I'm here to share our experience, my experience as a practitioner, as well as our role in Malaysia as the Evaluation Society. Now, just to get an idea of the audience here, could I just have a show of hands? How many of you are from the universities? Wonderful. And how many of you are from government? Private sector? Okay, that sets the tone for today. I just listened to Professor Schiff, and I totally agree with the importance of evaluation. Before I go into the opportunities and challenges of creating a national evaluation society, just give me 5 minutes to give my 5 cents worth on evaluation. It is fundamental. I've been involved in trying to promote evaluation in my own country for the past 15 years with a lot of difficulty and challenges, believe me. But evaluation is fundamental. It has a linkage to innovation, because we are talking about innovation, we're talking about change and knowledge organization. And we're trying to build my country in Malaysia, we're trying to move to that direction, because we are having great difficulty in either moving up or moving down. We are stuck in this middle income syndrome where we seem to be, our growth seems to be moderating. So they've given us this role, trying to say that Malaysia has to move up the value chain through innovation and through change. And very often innovation and change is linked to evaluation in the public sector at least, because we support initiatives in the private sector. But why is evaluation being seen as something different from a developmental process? It is not something different from the developmental process. It's part of the developmental process. We should not see it as something different. When you get up in the morning, sometimes you look at yourself in the mirror. Why do you look at? Why do you see whether you are what you seem you should be? Some days you look nice, some days you look bad. That's information coming to you, and you do something about that. Your children go to school, they come back with a report card. That's a matter of monitoring the performance. And then you see why they did so bad in certain subjects. You start analyzing the information. Maybe it's because I'm not enough at home. Maybe the school, the teacher who is teaching is not good. You start analyzing the information, and then you start making decisions. You go back home after a hard day's work, your wife cooks a meal for you, you have the food, and you analyze the food and say, this is not exactly the way it was yesterday. Why? Because you are used to a certain benchmark. But this goes on in everybody's daily life. It's part of the process, because we continuously want to improve. But if we do this unconsciously every day, then why is it that when we spend public funds, which amounts to billions of dollars, we see no reason to evaluate? We need to evaluate, because we have a mandate, we need to be held accountable, and we ensure that the money that was given to us through the mandate is actually spent for the right purpose and achieving the right results. So in Malaysia now, what we have decided is evaluation will not be an end process, neither will it be a process which involves only external parties. It will be part of our developmental process. It will be in the day-to-day running of the program. We did evaluations much earlier, and we found that very often after a 5-year gap, we start doing an evaluation, we find that information is not there. Professor Schiff talked about evidence-based evaluation, evidence-based decisions. But very often we find that at the end of a process, say after 5 years when we want to do an evaluation, critical information is not there. So what we do is we start giving out questionnaires to our stakeholders, and we start getting some perceptive information or perception information. Sometimes the information is embedded in your file somewhere, but recognizing the information might be a bit difficult. So very often evaluations are based on perception. And perception sometimes is not the best way to make policy decisions. What is worse than not doing an evaluation? Doing a bad evaluation. So it is important. Data is important. Information is important. So what we have started now is the whole process. From the time we start planning, we embed the requirement, evaluation information requirement into the planning process to ensure that at least the critical information that needs to answer the critical evaluation questions are obtained over a time series. So that when we do an evaluation, we have the critical information, and it's actually evidence-based. So that's my 5 cents worth as a preamble. Let me just go into why I'm actually here today. I'm supposed to talk about evaluation societies and what we have done in Malaysia, and the challenges we have faced, and the opportunities there are within this region itself. Now, I'm not going to go into the definitions too much, because I think these things you can read. I understand that these are going to be put into the website. But essentially, evaluation is a civil society organization. It's an organization you set up for specific purpose. Now, here I have put there, although it's distinct from state, family, and market organizations, areas that we need to look at. Although I belong to an evaluation society, I also work for the government. Sometimes I get my roles mixed up. I've also got members who are from the research organizations, from academia. Sometimes you don't know which cap you're wearing and you start getting carried away. Sometimes the relationships are very complex. And we need to be sure that which is the cap you're wearing when you are sitting in that specific chair. Because it sometimes involves ethical considerations. Now, why is evaluation societies important? Well, why are we all here? We are lucky. I mean, in your case, you're lucky in the sense that you have a chance to get together under a roof like this and build your organization or organization. In Malaysia, we were born in the barn. In the back rooms, a few of us got together and we used our own money and started the process. Essentially, it is important because evaluation societies can provide education and training in matters of evaluation. That's one of the areas. Networking and discussions of ideas. It's a group of people who are interested in evaluation. Mostly, we are also talking about spreading awareness because the public itself is not aware that and how they can ask certain questions regarding how their money is being spent. We often feel that after we pay the taxes, that's the end of it. The money goes to the government. The government can do whatever they feel they want to do with the money. But actually, as the stakeholders in this, you have a right to know where the money goes and how it's being spent. And I think this is one of the biggest conflicts that even in a society like ours have. Do we advocate this too much to the public and then make the government angry? Or do we let the government, help the government in trying to advocate the need to do evaluation so that they can report back to the public good information on where the money goes? Sometimes you get into this conflict situation as well. The Malaysian Evaluation Society, very specifically, we started up initially as in 1996 with a group of individuals, as I said. These were from the public sector and from the academia, and one or two from specific research organizations. We got together in their meeting rooms. Meeting rooms in research organizations are very dusty places, a lot of documents and materials, and we sat in the back room. We brought our own drinks, and we started talking about setting up an evaluation society. It all also manifested from the fact that we had some colleagues who were with the Australasian Evaluation Society who were pushing for this in Malaysia. And the interim committee was formed in 1998, more than 10 years ago, to carry out these activities. However, after getting some of this information and assistance from our colleagues from Australia, we officially registered the society in 1999. And when I put there, currently we have about 30 active members. Membership is again something very important. I'll come to that later. Why only 30 active members? I've only listed active members. It's not that we don't have more members. We have more members. Each time we have an international conference, we give out free memberships to everybody who is interested. Of course, they fill up and they are in our list. Pick up a green form or a blue form. Membership is not employment. It's a commitment to serve. So there's a difference here. So that's why I'm talking about the active members. We are one of the most active societies in Asia outside of AES, and recently I think Sri Lanka and Japan has also come on board, being quite active in this area. I'm really hopeful that Thailand will also follow suit, so we can have a network of organizations in this region which we can collaborate and work with. Very strong strategic role with the government, especially with the Ministry of Finance. Not so much because I am there, but even earlier, because the notion of evaluation is very often embedded in the budgeting process. When you give out money, you hold somebody accountable, and the accountability framework is normally linked very closely with evaluation. And we had mandated evaluation through the budgetary process. So that is why there is a close relationship in terms of a lot of things that we do in the society, which also supports government initiative. That's where I have sometimes fallen into a conflict situation. I'm not sure which hat I'm wearing. Now, the role of MES itself. Now, MES, as I said, is a dedicated organization for evaluation practitioners and managers. As Professor Schiff has mentioned, I would not venture into saying that all members are evaluators. Now, evaluation is a very complex area which covers a number of disciplines. And to be an expert in all those disciplines can sometimes be a bit daunting. So we are mostly practitioners, and we manage some of those evaluations. We have got people from government, we have got people from business community and academia. Not so much from, in Malaysian Evaluation Society is mostly from government and from private sector. Unfortunately, academia would like to be involved, but the thing is evaluation has not evolved in academia the way we would like it to evolve. We have evaluators who are involved in impact assessment of environment, in areas of project evaluation, but very few are actually experts in program evaluation. So we are trying to build that in the academy as well. Now, we also promote the among members, although the membership is small, and sometimes exchange of ideas requires documentation. When the membership is small, documentation can be expensive. So the best thing you can use is the idea of using IT. Very often everything is done through the website. And it's a very powerful tool these days to get connectivity to members who are not just in Kuala Lumpur, but also on the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur. Thirdly, the MES also carries out various activities related to evaluation, research, training, and development. Now, the thing is, a lot of research is required in ensuring that the right kind of evaluation is done. Now, in MES, for instance, or the Malaysian Evaluation Society has worked with government in coming up with a number of new methodologies, one of which is the internalized self-evaluation methodology, which talks about program managers doing their own evaluation. Now, that will be a topic for another day, but it is an interesting thing. We have already developed the system. We have already tested the system. And in areas where there is lack of capacity in doing evaluation, very often we introduce the methodology to the program managers. There are two options here. If you get an external evaluator to come inside, he brings in the methodology, but he will depend on the people in the organization for institutional memory and information. But very often, if there's already information and knowledge within the institution, the only thing you have to do is introduce a methodology. And they can do the evaluation itself. But of course, there are many things that we need to take into consideration in doing an internal evaluation. Now, the objectives of MES itself, or the civil society organization which is involved in evaluation, it gives us an opportunity to represent ourselves and regional events. Now, our members have also been invited, as well as have presented papers in the American Evaluation Association conferences, in the Australasian Evaluation conferences, in Africa, and the UK Evaluation Society conferences. We have also been invited to present papers at the Community of Practice meetings. Community of Practice are actually a community of people involved in the Asia-Pacific region in managing for development results. And evaluation is a very important component of managing for development results. We have been invited there. We've also been invited to OECD conferences and seminars where we have presented our views on evaluation and issues and challenges of doing evaluation in developing countries. Now, we also, one of the other objectives of the Malaysian Evaluation Society is to plan and analyze the status and future direction for evaluation and research. Now, like I said, we have got some inherent structural problems in Malaysia itself. Although we have advocated evaluation and mandated evaluation to the budgeting process, where we say that all activities and programs implemented by government should be evaluated once in 5 years. We didn't think about the capacity issues. And we have some serious capacity problems in Malaysia. So what we are doing is we are also looking at framing a 5-year plan to government to ensure that we can build capacity internally to assist us, to work as co-partners, to ensure that evaluation can be done systematically. And we're also talking about forming strategic alliances with other public and private sector organizations. We already have a strategic alliance with the Ministry of Finance, the Economic Planning Unit, and the Ministry of Education. These are agencies which are involved directly or indirectly in evaluation. The Economic Planning Unit has come on recently because we are focusing our planning structure or planning framework under the 10th Malaysia Plan on outcomes. Now, as Professor Schiff has mentioned, outcomes and impact areas are very abstract areas. It's not areas that are easy to pin down, or especially at the national level. We're talking about outcomes of a program at the national level. It's not something easy to pin down. Sometimes you can measure it, but to attribute it is difficult. We can look at the contributions, but the attribution is always a difficult area. So we are also working with the Ministry of Education, where there is a lot of resources available in evaluation. They do a lot of evaluations internally. We're also working with them on a collaborative basis in certain areas of evaluation. So initially, to develop evaluation, we have not gone to the point where we are taking an evaluation and looking at it critically and making comments on it just yet. That will come later. The first part is to build awareness within the public sector, and that's the focus we have right now. The other objectives includes information exchange. Information exchange, as I said, not just locally, but also regionally. Trying to work with the COP, the Community of Practice, with other institutions like the Japan Bank of International Cooperation, with ILO, where we exchange information. And because sometimes what they do is they come to us, because we are a national organization, one of the more active ones in this region. We have requests coming in from JBIC. They want somebody to do an evaluation on their ODA programs, or from the International Labour Organization saying that they would like somebody to do an evaluation of a number of programs that they have done in Indonesia. So we do also exchange ideas with them and try to point them in the right direction, or try to see who are the people who are available who can do the job for them. We also promote and facilitate research and development efforts and publications. Now, this is something we are trying to move into, but this requires a lot of commitment from members, as well as it requires a lot of money. But with the advent of we're trying to do most of this online, which costs very little money. But again, this requires a lot of inputs from members and time from members as well. We also try to provide advice on policy matters at all levels. The government very often refers to us for advice on evaluation and what is the best way to structure evaluation internally. As our good lady has mentioned earlier, evaluation comes at different levels. Just like planning and programming. Programming and planning is a systems theory thing. It is building blocks. And evaluation takes the same role as well. At different levels, you've got different performance frameworks, you've got different methodologies that need to be used to identify what kind of evaluations need to be done at different levels. So we do give advice to government. But of course, this again is the time that I have problems, because I sit in government as well as in the association as well, as society as well. So sometimes we have to be careful about what kind of things we prescribe to government. We will also give, MES also represents members on evaluation policy matters affecting them. If members are involved in any evaluative process which involves policy matters, sometimes they come to us for advice, and we do give them advice as well. Now, MES also has assisted in coming up with the guidelines and standards, as well as the ethical considerations. We have not developed that wholly in-house. We've taken the best practices from the US and from Canada, and we've compiled standards as well as ethical considerations for doing evaluation. And it's in the process of evolution because we need to contextualize it for local purposes. And often a lot of these evaluations that are done in government use these standards and ethical considerations when they come up with the terms of reference as well as the evaluations when they are. Now, what are we doing now in Malaysia in terms of activities? One of the big ones that we have is this biannual international evaluation conference. We have been doing this since 2004. We have had one in 2004, 2006, 2008, and the last one was this year in March. And this is one of the biggest events that we conduct, and it's one of the biggest conferences in this region. We normally get participation of between 100 and 200 people, half of which are from international audiences. And we get participation from international speakers. A lot of resources there. People are willing to come and spend their own money, in fact, to come and talk to us about evaluation. Just because this is one of the first regions this is one of the first areas that are putting up such a conference at the international level. In our first conference, we have eminent speakers like Dr. Anna Love, Ray Rees from World Bank. We had Bert Perrin from Canada. We were trying to get Michael Scriven, but last minute he had something else on, so he didn't make it. But this is the kind of speakers who are willing to even pay their own way to come and share their experiences with us. And all they required was a forum. We also have international developing country seminars. When we have our international conferences, we collaborate with international partners, either UNDP, IDEAS. We had one with, let me guess, apart from IDEAS and JBIC, we had one with JBIC as well, where we had international collaboration with them to have developing country seminars where we talk about issues and problems faced by developing countries in carrying out evaluation. That is normally on the day after the evaluation, the conferences. The conferences are normally for 2 days. And the developing country seminar will be on day 5 because day 3 and day 4 is normally for workshops. We run workshops as well. That's where we get most of our funding. We also do evaluation forums internationally as well as getting international as well as local experts. We have identified specific local experts where we run forums, a half-a-day forum. And we also look out for international experts who happen to be flying past or stopping over in our country. We kidnap them for half a day. We get them into an agenda and we get them to give us a talk on the specific areas of expertise in evaluation. We do a lot of advocacy work with the government, mainly through public sector organizations, and also advisory role to regional networks and formation of similar societies in South Asia. We have got requests from many countries in Southeast Asia especially, from Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, who has been requesting to help them set up similar networks in their countries. But again, we are constrained by funds, our own funds, to actually go to that country and assist them. So what we do is a lot of the work we do online. We assist them by giving them how constitutions need to be structured, what kind of roles they can play. We give them advice online. But situations like this where we're able to come and also talk to you and share our ideas with you would be, I think, a bit more effective. We also do awareness programs through public forums, as I said. We have strategic alliances with the Ministry of Finance. This is going on very strongly. In the last conference, the Ministry of Finance even gave us a small grant because they find that we are doing such a good work in terms of advocacy for evaluation. They even gave us a small grant, small meaning about 5,000 Malaysian dollars, which went a long way for us as far as we are concerned. More importantly, they supported us. The Minister of Finance will come and officiate the function, and we're getting buy-in at the highest level with the ministry itself. And activities specifically geared to professional development by providing education training in matters related to evaluation. A lot of our members are also from academia, some from academia, and a lot of them from research houses or companies which are doing research. So they support us professionally in terms of development and also providing the necessary training to our members as well as If sometimes organizations require assistance in terms of evaluation, but we do not do this directly because right now internally we do not have, members do have capacity, but we do not advocate members into going into evaluation directly. What they do is we point them to the companies which are, or individuals who own companies within our organization, and we tell them what. Now, collaborative work, as I said, one of the important things is when you have limited money, you have done collaborative work with evaluation workshops with UNDP. In 2004, when we first had our first international evaluation conference, UNDP's evaluation network were having their meeting, I think, somewhere in Thailand. We spoke to them about the first conference we were having, and we required support from UNDP New York. Then they asked us for the program, and they had moved the whole meeting down to Kuala Lumpur. And MES participated in their meeting, and the whole team that was there also participated in our conference. So that was one collaborative effort that worked well. We also have had collaborative work done with IOCE, as I think most of you know about IOCE. And we also, last year in 2010, we had ideas, and the main theme there was impact evaluation, the need to do impact evaluation. So we have done collaborative work with a number of international agencies. Like I said, over the last 5 years, 5 to 10 years, what has MES achieved? We have gone in a big way in assisting the government in developing this performance management component and building awareness. The government has been advocating the need to do evaluation, and it's mandatory to do evaluation. But again, limited capacity in trying to push this issue of advocacy. So we have supported the government in terms of the need and the importance of doing evaluation, and why the ministries or the programs need to do evaluation. Evaluation has featured in a big way into the 10th Malaysia Plan, as I said. The 10th Malaysia Plan has been structured in such a way that it becomes part of the developmental process. And all agencies are required to identify the kind of evaluation questions each program is supposed to ask, and also build in the information requirement from the planning stage, so that there is structured time series information available when they start doing evaluation. We also have assisted government agencies in designing and building evaluation standards and best practices, as I mentioned. Evaluation conferences, the big evaluation conference also brought international experts to our shores. It's always expensive having to send our people down to international courses and also international seminars overseas. So the best thing is to bring them to our shores, and they're always willing to come. And that way they get exposure to international best practices of what's happening in the rest of the world. We also come up with new international new evaluation designs. As I said, we talked about the internalized self-evaluation modality. It started with the first conference where we brought in Dr. Arnold Love, and he introduced this notion of internalized self-evaluation. And as I know it, World Bank is also pushing this thing in a big way, because internalized evaluation not just builds the process internally, but also empowers program managers to understanding their programs much better, and how to implement the programs in a more effective manner. We are also talking about now, apart from the international evaluation conferences, now we're talking about doing a conference at the national level, talking about issues and problems about evaluation within the national context. We're going into that very soon, starting from next year. We're talking about publications and newsletters. Again, I said this requires a lot of funding and money, but the option is to do it online. We have some money with us because the international conference that we run, we have managed to compile some money. We're talking about sponsoring students as well as members who are involved in research, part sponsorship, but taking into consideration some of the society's interest in it as well. We're also talking about online discussion on contemporary issues in evaluation within the portal itself. We have rebuilt the portal. If you go into the website, you will see that it's still under construction. We are improving the portal. We're also talking about providing support for paper presenters in local as well as international conferences. International conferences, sometimes to sponsor one person can be a bit expensive. And very often, when you go and present a paper, even if you're a paper presenter at a conference in AEA or AES, you have to pay for everything, not just your fare, but even the conference participation. So sometimes it get a bit expensive for developing country participants. So then we try to support them by giving them some financial support when they go and present papers. And this year, or next year, we have already come up with this idea. We've been in discussion with some of our partners, especially in ADB. We're talking about starting annual evaluation awards in Malaysia itself. That means submission of evaluation awards for evaluations that are done with in specific categories and meeting specific requirements. The guidelines for this are being drawn up by a small task team within the Malaysian Evaluation Society. This is to upscale and to also ensure that evaluation reaches certain standards. Now, membership, as I said, who are the members? We have a lot of members, but we don't actually advocate broad-based membership for the sake of being members. As I said, membership is not employment, or this is not a club membership where once you sign on the dotted line, you ask, what are the facilities that I have in this club? This is a commitment to work together. This is a commitment to contribute. This is an organization, it's a civil society organization. So there must be that level of seriousness as well as the level of commitment in trying to contribute the time to ensure that the objectives of that society is met. So we have a dedicated group of people who are willing to put in the time. We have about 30 people. Of course, this will also reduce internal politicking. Sometimes it gets to be a bit political. But we have a dedicated group of people who only focus on one thing. We have been focusing on coming up with programs for the larger group, and that has worked quite well for us. So, but the only problem or the downside of this is it affects you financially. Very often you depend on membership for finances. But fortunately, because we have been running international conferences, that has given us sufficient financial stability to undertake our programs for at least 2 years. What we get out of these international conferences is sufficient to sustain us for 2 years. In the initial years, our operating cost was very low. We were squatting as squatters in somebody else's organization. Our official address was with one of the research organizations who has agreed to give us a space to put all our statutory documents. In Malaysia, we need to be registered under the Society of Registrar of Societies. There are a lot of statutory requirements like submission of accounts, submission of your annual meeting and notes, your minutes. These are all requirements. Otherwise, they will come after you. So all the statutory requirements had to be placed somewhere, and we had no office. We had to get a shelf from one of the research organizations, and they agreed to give us some space and support for all this. But now we are much better off. We are able to employ one full-time staff to manage our affairs, and we have enough money to actually sustain us for 2 years. So you need money to get into this kind of activities. We also go into activities which are cost-sharing proposals. Like I said, when you find an international expert flying to the country, you're stopping over, we hijack him for half a day. Through the Ministry of Finance, in collaboration with the Malaysian Evaluation Society, we run a forum. He will talk on a specific agenda, and we will invite all the members, including public sector organizations and academia. And at any one time, we get about anything between 60 to 100 people attending these forums. And it's normally held in the Ministry of Finance. We have a very large auditorium in the Ministry of Finance. I get the auditorium, and I finance the food for the day. That means the refreshments will be financed by the Ministry of Finance. The only thing the MES has to worry about is getting the guy in and getting the guy out, paying for the accommodation. So we work collaboratively in that sense as well. So I think such propositions are possible and with very little cost. International obligations, obligations in terms of IOC. We've been working together with IOC. IOC has been supporting us, but we also have had our differences with IOC because of the membership and the amount of money that needs to be paid. Sometimes in a developing country to pay that kind of money for membership sometimes can be a bit difficult. But we still do work with them very closely. We have also spoken to them about reducing the membership to increase the number of members first. Then we can talk about increasing the membership or going into collaboration with other developmental organizations like World Bank, ADB. Because each time MES approaches ADB or any other development organizations, the first thing they ask, who are you affiliated with? Are you affiliated with any international organizations like IDEAS, IOC? we said, yeah, we are affiliated to IOC, then who are the members? And we find the membership is limited. So they're reluctant to come inside. So we need this kind of broad-based membership in an international organization before we can actually sell the idea of getting some kind of funding from development organizations. So we're also working together with IOCE, IDS, and a few other international organizations. Now, like I said, the main challenge for us is financial, always been financial. We need to, financial in meeting local obligations, financial in promoting regional requests for advice and support. We have got a lot of requests from regional entities in coming over there to assist them in developing similar associations, but we are limited by the funds that we have. So we try to assist them offline or remote as much as we can. The other challenge, of course, is, like I said, members join with a specific purpose in mind. They said, what is in it for me? What am I getting out of this organization? They must have a sense of purpose when they join an organization. So maintaining that continued interest is also a challenge. So there must be continuous programs, and they must be involved in such a way that it will capture their interest and maintain them. There's always a chance that after the first 2 years, you'll find the membership going down. But whether it's sustainable will depend on the kind of programs that you run internally and how they can contribute to the programs and how it will affect the organizations that they work in. The other problem is the conflict is, so I told you about conflict. In the earlier slide, I said that all members of the Malaysian Evaluation Society belong to another organization. Sometimes there's this role conflict. When you advocate something, is it because of vested interests or is it because of interests of the society? That conflict role sometimes comes into play, and you must make sure that you strike a clear balance, that you are doing it for the purpose of the organization and not for the other hat that you wear. And that sometimes is very difficult. I myself find it difficult because I get a lot of pressure from the colleagues in my society saying that, hey, look, what the government is doing wrong, we need to write something in the newspapers, or we need to write a note to the government to say that what they're doing is wrong. And I have to say, no, I can't do just that. Because we are in the stage where we are advocating. If we run into a situation where we find that the government finds that we are being a bit atrocious against what they are doing, then they might pull the plug on us and not support us, and then we find ourselves being isolated. But we are in a state of development where advocacy is more important. And the government is buying into the fact that, yes, evaluation is important. And they are supporting us to help them with the advocacy level. So we will do that first. And then as it reaches a certain level of maturity, then we start giving independent views about what's happening. Okay, with that, I think I've covered some of the main areas of concerns that you may have as a network. And I think it's going to be a challenge, but at least you have support from UNICEF in at least garnering or galvanizing a group like this. Like I said, we were born in the barn, not in the hotel. We came through and met those challenges, and I think you will have similar challenges. But I wish you all the best. And if you need quite any, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Koshi. It has been really interesting to learn about the history, the evolution, the challenges, the achievements that the Malaysian Evaluation Society has got as of today. I would like to highlight, if I may, taking advantage of my role of moderator, some of the issues that Koshi has raised. And I think that a network has several challenges, but at the same time he has highlighted several achievements and activities that are foreseen for the future. And this is mainly because they were able to manage the tensions between being advocates, doing advocacy role, vis-a-vis judging what the governments or other actors are doing, fostering collaborative action, but at the same time, not only promoting the use of evaluation, using evaluation, but also advancing knowledge in terms of evaluations, so proposing standards for evaluations, training, proposing methodologies, at the same time at proposing, advocating for the use and evidence-based decision-making. So these are challenges that can actually be met and can be dealt with in terms of when it comes to work as a network. And I want, if I may, on behalf of all of us, to thank you very much, Koshi, because I think that the Malaysian Evaluation Society has already started its collaboration and national network. Thank you very, very much. And I give the floor to participants to ask questions or to make comments. If you don't mind, Koshi, can we take 3 by turn? Okay. The floor is open. Yes, please.
I think it is very interesting presentation, and I agree with what that you said at the beginning of your presentation. You compare the evaluation like when we look to the mirror, we look ourselves